As we turn the corner into the second half of this season, we are going to start leaving behind all the preparation and planning and learning that we're the people of God and that He's empowering us and that we're supposed to proclaim the kingdom and protect our peace while we deliver peace to those who are ready for it. We're going to start looking at what Jesus says about the response to it and how the world is going to react and what it's going to mean for us. And so as we move into this second half, we're going to be talking about how to protect ourselves, how to make sure that we're doing what God is asking us to do. We're also going to recognize that it's going to have a profound effect and influence on the people around us. In other words, He's going to fill us with His gospel, fill us with His Spirit, so that we can be emptied for others. And that's why we call the show Filled to Empty. Welcome. I'm Pastor Michael Rogers.
For me to live is Christ. For me to die is gain. Every moment in between, there'll be joy and there'll be pain. I can't worry about the future or change a thing about my past. I've got this moment to believe, and I'm gonna make it last. I am filled to be emptied.
So being a couch potato is different today than it was in the past. It used to be that you would have to have if you had a remote, you'd have that and you get your popcorn and you'd turn on the television and then you'd flip through channels till you got to what you liked. But nowadays with streaming and YouTube TV and all of these different things, you can get all of these different subscriptions. And so you can pick a show and really just sit down and watch it and make the most out of it, man. Just watch episode after episode after episode. There are no more cliffhangers. There are no more worries about waiting for the next week for what's going to happen. You knew that you could just go on to the next thing. And that's really cool. My wife and I love to do the home improvement kind of shows where they take a place and somebody comes in and somehow they happen to have $50,000 or $60,000 of discretionary money and hey, fix this place up for us and here's 2 or 3 ideas that we want, and then they fix it for them, and it's always amazing what they do, and the design is always great and it's always a lot of fun. We were watching one of those the other day, and they showed him 2 or 3 different places, and the third place they showed him was a church building. The old church buildings, the first church building in the town, and it had fallen into disrepair. A lot of the front had been changed and moved, the side had been modernized, and the inside had been gutted. There were no chairs or pews or anything, no carpet. It was just gutted. And the whole time I'm watching the episode, I'm trying to keep track of what they're trying to do and how they're going to design it and everything. And all I can think of are the babies that were dedicated there and the marriages that happened there and the sermons that were preached there and all of the things that happened that were spiritual there that left a legacy in that town that is probably still going on, even though the building has fallen into disrepair. The reason that I'm excited about doing Filled to Empty is because I want all of us to see that if we aren't careful, that is what's happening to the church in America today. Not the buildings. Buildings don't matter. Turn it into a house. Make it into something. We'll have house church there. The buildings don't matter. But if we aren't careful, what we're going to find is that over time, the world is going to start taking the vestiges of the church and make it in its own image and live inside of it as if they own it. And I'm worried about that. So what I want to do is help us to see that if we're not on mission, if we're not doing something about it right now, then it's going to be years and years before we can recover if we ever do at all. Here are some promises that Jesus gave us. He said that He's going to build His church and the gates of hell will not prevail. He told us that He'd be with us to the end of the age. He promised the filling of our bodies and our minds and our souls with His Spirit. He gave us an opportunity to have the power, resurrection power that He had. And he also promised us that if we were going to represent him, his Spirit would speak for us. And somewhere along the line, we've bought into this idea that there are only certain people that can do that. There are only certain people who can manage to let people know about who Jesus is. And I think some of it came from fear. I think we struggle because there are people who, when we start talking about our faith, act like they know more about our faith than we do. And it isn't so much that we can't answer them, it's that they're not really listening. And we're wondering, is it even worth it to have the fight? Or we're running into situations where we realize that the status of our careers in our jobs can be affected by how much we bring Jesus into the equation. Or we just start realizing how hard it is to really even understand the gospel for ourselves. And so we're scared we're going to say it wrong. We're scared we're going to misrepresent him. And we talked about all this stuff and facing your fears. But here's the thing is, the biggest fear that we have is that people are going to judge us for it. People are going to dislike us for it. People are going to even be in opposition to us. People are going to give us trouble that we can't imagine. And so what we've decided is maybe it would be better if we just let the world have its day and start praying for the second coming of Christ. Jesus has got to come back. You see how bad things are getting? Jesus has got to come back. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right way to go. I don't know if it's God's intention that the church becomes so weary and wore out that it just decides, I'm finished. Bridegroom, come get me. I don't see that anywhere in Scripture. As a matter of fact, you look in Revelation, he talks about what it looks like if we've forgotten our first love. He's told us what it means if we're lukewarm, and none of it's good. So I realize that what I'm asking people to do, the tension today is what I'm asking people to do is get back on board on mission and start recognizing that Christ is greater. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. But at the same time, I recognize that we've gotten out of practice and we've just had trouble. I have a young man who is in my class and he wants to know how to read, but he doesn't want to read to learn how. But he loves sports. So he was talking to me about playing baseball, and he says, I play second base. And I said, that's great. Do you have fun playing second base? He said, no, I'm not any good. I said, well, you know what makes you better? And he said, no. I said, practice. And he said, yeah. I said, you know what else works better when you practice? Reading. And he looked at me like, okay, I see what you did there. I don't want to do that. Here's the thing. The thing I'm asking us to practice can get us in a whole lot of trouble right away. As a matter of fact, if the enemy sees us waking up, he's going to make sure that we get in a whole lot of trouble right away. So my question today is, as we go into Matthew 10 and we start looking at that, is rather than trying to refurbish the building, what if we rediscover the purpose and we give ourselves an opportunity to speak to people and practice with people and trust that God is going to take care of us? Because I believe he will. Because I believe that his intention is that all men might be saved. And if that's the case, then he's going to give us the opportunity to have the right things to say. And even if we mess up, he's going to use those errors to bring people to an understanding of Jesus. Just because he called us to the mission doesn't mean his expectation is that we accomplish it. He's calling us to the mission to say yes so that he can accomplish it. Let's talk about how that works. One of the things that's true whenever a preacher gets up to, or a teacher gets up to tell you a little bit about a passage is that it's almost impossible to explain everything that the passage teaches. And God has always helping us to understand better and better. So sometimes we start teaching something and we realize there's something inside of it that we didn't expect that also needs to be said. And the passage that we covered in Matthew 10 last week has one of those things in it as I was looking. We covered 10 up through verse 26, 27 last time. But right here in verse 25 is something that's really important, and it comes straight out of their experience. Jesus says this to them, it is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher and the servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? What I realized as I was looking at that was, I don't think it's been that long since that happened to Jesus. I think it happened really recently. And I went back 2 or 3 chapters to try to find it. And as I did, I read and read. I couldn't find it. And I read and I read. And I got all the way up to the last verses before chapter 10. In other words, where we started this journey in season 2, right before that, here's what happens to Jesus. It's in chapter 9, verses 32 to 34. As they were going away, behold, a demon-oppressed man who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the mute man spoke. And the crowds marveled, saying, never was anything like this seen in Israel. But the Pharisees said, he casts out demons by the prince of demons. In other words, when Jesus says this in chapter 10, remember, he's gone away, he's gone overnight, he's decided who his 12 are, he comes back, and he starts equipping them and preparing them and letting them know, here's the plan, you're the people, I want you to be the ones to do it. And as he moves them into that, and as he starts talking to them about the consequences of following him and proclaiming the kingdom and going out ahead of him into these towns and be like sheep and shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves, he's also thinking, I want you to know that there's going to be fear, but it's going to be okay. So remember when they called me the prince of demons? If you're following me and they call me that, what are they going to call you? Because they know I have that power. They're not sure of you, but they know I'm a threat. When you show that you're a threat too, there's going to be an issue. And that's why he says, so have no fear of them. Nothing is covered that will not be revealed or hidden that will not be known. This is why he tells them to shout from the rooftops and to say in the light, is because he's already expecting that the opposition they thought they might get is going to happen. It's not if, it's when. If we're going to tell the world about Jesus, there are people who are going to do something to try to oppose that. It's not that they are evil people who who understand what's at stake, but are saying no to it. There may be some like that, but for many of them, they just don't understand what's at stake. And so as you come to them and tell them something, what they hear is echoes of what they have been told by the world we really mean. We don't really mean that we're saving you by grace. We really mean come in and be like us. We don't really mean that Jesus saves. What we really mean is be a part of the church so that we can change you. And so they're hearing these things and they're just not sure. There are some people who have just decided that no matter what you say, they are not going to believe that there is a God, or they're going to believe in something entirely different. We can pray for those. We can try to figure that out. But what we have to do is decide that that's up to God to figure out. It's not up to us to figure out. What we have to do is be open and available to the opportunities and not let the opposition, not let the people who would do everything they could to stop us, keep us from doing it. We have to be judicious. We have to be careful. There's a difference between being risky and being foolish. When the pandemic started, one of the things that I told my whole congregation was, be wise. Don't be scared, but don't be foolish. Be wise in what God is telling you to do. But don't be scared of what's happening. God is bigger than the pandemic. But don't be foolish and take risks that you don't need to take. And I think that's a part of what it means for us to just be ourselves and be shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves, to walk in the purity of God, to understand what it means to follow God and with all of our hearts and try to figure out how to make that happen. And knowing that as we go out and we decide we're going to start proclaiming, people are going to have trouble with that. So Jesus says in verse 28, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows. So what Jesus is trying to help us to see is that God is asking us to be in volatile situations, but not by ourselves. As a matter of fact, if we go in by ourselves, we're probably going to muck that up. We're probably going to have a hard time with that, because when we go in by ourselves and we go in under our own power, we have to lean on our own understanding of who God is. When we trust in God and we allow him to bring those conversations into our lives, but we see the opportunities, we take advantage of them when they happen, when we recognize that he's the one who's going to be speaking for us, then he calls to mind for us the things that need to be said. And we are able to trust that and just be there and do that. If there's opposition that comes from that, then we need to remember, whatever the opposition is, there is a God who cares more for us than he does for sparrows. There is a God who cares more for us than what these people are trying to do to us. And so we can trust him. And that just goes back to Finding Purple. What does it mean to have faith in this God that we say we believe in? Do we believe that he is with us unless we make a mistake? Or do we believe that he is with us regardless of the mistakes, and he's going to give us opportunities to make them right? Or he's going to use those mistakes to help us out and help others to understand him? In other words, is it really up to us to save anyone, or is it up to him to save anyone and up to us to be there and available as his tool? One of the things that I've struggled with in my walk is this idea, and I've said it often from the pulpit, and I've said it as though it's a good thing, but it can be misconstrued. And that is, man, you just got to be ready for God to use you. And in our world today, to be used is to be manipulated. But I don't think of it as him using us like he conned us into doing something. What I mean when I say God uses us is that we are the tools in his tool belt. The Word and the Spirit work together inside of us, and he has decided there's only a plan A. Jesus is going to die and rise again. He's going to come back someday for us. In between those two times, he's going to use his church to reach the world. He's going to fill us with his Spirit. He's going to give us the words to say. He's going to help us see the opportunities, and he's going to take care of it. He's going to reach the world. So it's not up to us. And if something happens that is negative for us, we have to trust that this God who loves us is still for our good and is still wanting to take care of us. Now, how does he take care of us? Look at Paul. Paul said he always had a thorn in his side, and God said, my grace is sufficient for you. Paul was constantly in and out of prisons. He was constantly going from one court to another. He was constantly being thrown out of towns. He had to be lifted out in a basket. He had to be snuck away in the middle of the night. One time he was stoned and left for dead. All these things. Of course, I'm not expecting all of us to be Paul, but what I'm saying is, if we think that following this God of ours and telling people about Jesus has to also be free and easy and comfortable, we're sadly mistaken. There is a cost to standing up for him, and that's why it's so hard. There is a sacrifice that we make so that he can be heard. And that sacrifice is not us browbeating everyone with the Bible, but looking for those opportunities and saying, I'm going to speak for Jesus here. And I'm going to do it not out of love. I'm going to do it not so I can judge someone. I'm going to do it not so that I can tell someone I'm right. I'm going to do it because I love someone and I want them to have what I have. I want them to feel the peace of Christ in their hearts too. I want them to experience the love and joy and peace and patience and all those fruits of the Spirit that can happen. And because of that, I would rather tell them the truth about eternity than be comfortable in today's times. And Jesus says, if you do that, well, this is how he says it. Verse 32. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven. Makes me immediately think of Peter. Imagine being Peter and you have heard Jesus teach this. The first time that you were sent out to do the miracles of Christ, you were told, if you acknowledge me, I will acknowledge you. And if you deny me, I will deny you. And then the crunch time comes and Peter denies him 3 times. And in the middle of that, Jesus looks at him and he knows that Jesus knows. What were those days like between the trial and the resurrection? What were those days like for Peter? And yet, later on we read, after Jesus comes back, that he and Peter are having a conversation and he asks him 3 times, Peter, do you love me? And Peter has the opportunity to acknowledge him. He has the opportunity to make up for that. He has the opportunity to be honest with his God. Jesus said, hey, do you love me with an agape, godly love? And Peter said, I love you with a brotherly love. Lord, you know me. You know I do. This is what I know to love you with. But Jesus' response was, feed my sheep. Now, in our current day, what we have to remember is that if we miss those opportunities, we can't kick ourselves. We have to recognize that Jesus is still in the business of repentance. He's still in the business of redemption. He is still in the business of bringing us back to him. But at the same time, every time we miss, we're just missing opportunities. How can we school ourselves? How can we do the practice? How can we get to the place where when those opportunities present themselves, we just naturally rely on the Spirit and let him do the work? So as I've said in previous episodes, one of the things that I look at when I'm teaching is what do we need to know so that we become something, so that we live it out this way. I think it's how Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount. And I don't know if maybe you're sensing it. Things are getting more serious. And that's not me making things more serious. I'm not all of a sudden turning a corner and starting to talk about things because this is what I really wanted to talk about. What I'm doing is I'm responding to what Jesus is doing. Jesus started off and he said, hey, boys, I'm going to give you the power. I'm going to give you the ability. I'm going to send you ahead of me. I'm going to do the things that I need to do to make you successful. I'm going to do that in such a way that you're going to be able to go and you don't need to take a tunic. You don't need to take a staff. You don't need to take any money. You just need to go to people of peace. I want you to go to the Jews and not to the Samaritans or the Gentiles. I want you to spend time with people of peace. Shake the dust off your feet. If you need to leave, take your peace with you. But after he does all of that, he has been turning toward all of the things that are going to be caused by it. Look, man, the most fun I've ever had is sharing the gospel, is giving us somebody an opportunity to understand what it means to follow Jesus and have them say yes. But I think about all the times that I've had an opportunity to do that, and it hasn't been as simple as the first part of this passage in Matthew 10. It has most of the time felt like it has the last 3 or 4 episodes, where there are fears and there are worries and there's opposition, there are things against us. And what we need to know is it's worth it anyway. It's worth it anyway to tell somebody about the eternity that they can have with Jesus Christ. And if we don't have that moment where we realize that burning, that sense of, oh my goodness, who knows if I'm the last person who gets to say something to them about this? The opportunity comes up and I let it pass. When will I have the opportunity again? This is not about guilt. This is not saying, oh my goodness, I missed it again. It's about saying, man, what will it take for me to get serious about what God is asking me to do? So what I want us to do is recognize and know that Jesus sees all of the heartache and all of the issues and all of the fears and all of the obstacles that can happen as we try to share the gospel with people. He understands all of that. it's also so worth it to him that he let his own creation crucify him for it. And we're worried about a little discomfort. We're worried about opposition. We're worried that we might lose our jobs or lose our status at work. Look, this is serious. This is eternity. This is not about us. Here's what God wants us to become. If we know all of that, what he wants us to become are people who see that and see the urgency. And there's a little clock ticking in the back of their head that's going, man, I just want to see if I can reach one more. That was actually the whole vision statement of our last church in Indiana. We just summed it up in 2 words: one more. And we unveiled that one more, that idea, to our congregation on Sunday. And the following weekend, a little movie called Hacksaw Ridge came out. And it talked about this man who was a Seventh-day Adventist who went into war but was a pacifist, so he would not carry a rifle. And on Hacksaw Ridge, he saved over 70 men, but just by going back into the fray and grabbing them. And every time he went and grabbed one, he said, one more. What makes a person do that? Well, if you understand the stakes, it should make all of us do it. We need to become the kind of people who are just going, one more. God, just give me one more opportunity, one more chance, one more person to talk to, one more circumstance that goes that way, one more conversation that sweeps in. And when we didn't expect it at all, and we're suddenly talking about Jesus to someone. I used to be so jealous of people who had airplane stories. You know, those stories where they sat down next to someone in an airplane and they didn't know them when they took off, but by the time they landed, the person was a believer. Those are rare. Those are gems. Those are opportunities that just sometimes fall into our laps. But they are not in and of themselves evangelism. When we are proclaiming the kingdom and we are helping people to understand who Jesus is, when we become the kind of people who see the opportunities, what we realize is every opportunity that we have to give God glory for the things that are happening in our lives and in the lives of others is a part of that process. We need to become people of opportunity who recognize that every time we open our mouths, it's a chance for us to glorify God to someone else. That's not going to happen right away. That's not going to happen overnight. That's not going to happen without practice. That's not going to happen because you think it. It's not going to happen because I did a TV show about it. It's not going to happen because you watched the show 4 times and took notes. It's going to happen because you have gotten up in the morning and you have prayed, God, today, let me see the opportunities. And maybe you let the first 4 or 5 pass, but that 5th or 6th one, you went, I'm going to say something right here. And the next day you wake up and you say, God, let me be better at finding those opportunities. And maybe you remember by circumstance 3 or conversation 4 until you get to the place where it's just naturally who you are, and wherever you go, that's who you are. That's why it's so important for us to gather in small groups and to talk to each other about it and to help each other, because you look at the pro golfers on the PGA Tour. I don't care who it is that you look at. I don't care if it's a man or a woman. I don't care if they've won a dozen championships or not won any. Every one of them has a coach. Every one of them has somebody who's helping them get better. Well, our coach, our mentor, our rabbi is asking us to sit at his feet and let us help him see. But what he's doing is he's sending us out. That's what this whole passage is about. He's sending us out and saying, you're going to mess this up. Come and tell me about the messes so I can help you figure out and understand better. And as we get together as believers together and we have those conversations, it is easier for us to see what God is telling us about how to fix it when we have other believers who are also trying, who are able to decide and devise, rightly understand the Word of God and help us to see what could help in that situation. And so we become an army. I found out today that there used to be an air base in Ardmore, Oklahoma. Never knew it. There's no real chance to see it except for a mural downtown that it was an air base. There was a time when there was war, and there was a time for them to get ready, and they trained people there. And that Air Force Base, I don't know what the history is, but they helped. It's now Ardmore Air Park. And CEOs fly in, and they have a pretty restaurant that you can go to. And there's no chance, there's not a single chance for there to be any preparation for war there. The purpose has completely changed. That's my fear for the church. Our purpose has so completely changed that we look more like an air park than an air base. And the truth is, God still cares about the people of this world, and he still wants to see more of them come to him. And his plan A is you and me. So what are we going to do? Hey, if you have really enjoyed the teaching on Filled to Empty, then I want to let you know about another opportunity you have to just go deeper and to learn more. I wrote some books under the series Finding Hope, Faith for the Frustrated. The first one is already out. It's called Rethink, and it is about repenting and understanding what it means for us to use love as a motivation instead of our frustration. And it really goes through how you can do that. The second book is called Follow, and Follow is an opportunity for us to just look at the gospel and find out what it means to follow Jesus with everything we have. And they are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, just about any bookstore that you want to go to. You can find it all at filledtoempty.tv.
For me to live is Christ, for me to die is gain. Every moment in between, there'll be joy and there'll be pain. I can't worry about the future or change a thing about my past. I've got this moment to believe, and I'm gonna make it last. I am filled to be empty.